The message arrived at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, right as I was reviewing construction blueprints for the Harbor Point development. My phone buzzed against the metal desk in my cramped office overlooking the Portland waterfront, and I glanced down to see Zoya's name on the screen. "I'm at my grandma's funeral. Don't call. I need time alone." I set my pencil down and stared at the words. Zoya Haldenor Callix, my wife of 6 years, had a talent for dramatic timing, but this felt different. Something about the phrasing struck me as odd, too clean, too prepared. In our entire relationship, I'd never known her to ask for space. She thrived on attention, on being the center of every conversation, every crisis. My name is Dean Callix, and I've been managing construction projects in coastal Maine for 12 years. I know how to spot when something doesn't fit the blueprint. This text was like finding a load-bearing wall marked as optional, technically possible, but suspicious as hell. I archived the message without responding and returned to my work, but the unease lingered. Fina Marin, Zoya's grandmother, was 91 and sharp as a tack. Last I'd heard, she was planning her weekly bridge game with the ladies from her retirement community. The woman who'd outlived 2 husbands and 3 recessions didn't seem like she was going anywhere soon. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Vic, my foreman, and the closest thing I had to a best friend. The message was simple. A link with the words, "Dude, isn't this your wife?" I clicked the link and found myself watching a live stream from downtown Portland's newest rooftop bar, The Pinnacle. The camera panned across a crowd of 20-somethings and 30-somethings, all holding craft cocktails and laughing at something happening off-screen. Then the view shifted, and there she was. Zoya sat at a high-top table, her auburn hair catching the late afternoon sunlight, wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last month. She was laughing, not the polite laugh she used at work functions, but the genuine, throwing her head back laugh that had first attracted me to her 8 years ago. Her arm was draped around the shoulders of a man I recognized immediately. Beck Darren. Beck, her college boyfriend, the investment consultant with the perfectly styled hair and the BMW he'd bought to compensate for whatever he was lacking elsewhere. The same Beck she'd sworn she'd cut contact with after our wedding. The same Beck she'd claimed was ancient history whenever his name came up. I watched for 30 seconds, taking in every detail. The timestamp showed 3:15 p.m., 28 minutes after she'd texted me about the funeral. The location tag confirmed it was the Pinnacle. Beck's hand rested on her thigh as he leaned in to whisper something in her ear, and she giggled like a teenager. I screenshotted the stream, captured the timestamp, and saved the video file. Then I opened a new message to Zoya and typed 2 words. My condolences. I hit send and immediately began my verification process. Years of managing construction projects had taught me to document everything, to check and double-check before making any moves. I pulled up the Pinnacle's website and confirmed their address. I cross-referenced the timestamp with my phone records to verify when Zoya's text had arrived. I even checked the weather, clear skies, no sign of the rain that would typically accompany a funeral. Everything lined up perfectly. My wife was lying. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I leaned back in my office chair and considered my options. I could confront her directly, demand an explanation, maybe even drive downtown and make a scene at the bar, but that wasn't my style. I'd learned long ago that the best way to handle a liar was to give them enough rope to hang themselves. Instead, I opened my contacts and found Marin Hollis's number. Zoya's mother was many things: judgmental, image-obsessed, and perpetually disappointed in her daughter's choice to marry a blue-collar construction manager, but she was also brutally honest. If anyone would know the truth about Fina's condition, it would be Marin. I crafted my message carefully. Hi Marin, just saw something online and wanted to check. Is this from before or after lunch today? I attached the screenshot of Zoya and Beck at the bar, making sure the timestamp was clearly visible. I hit send and waited. The response came back in less than 2 minutes. "What is this?" "We're having lunch with Fina right now. She's sitting across from me eating her chicken salad sandwich. What's going on, Dean?" There it was. Confirmation that Zoya's grandmother was very much alive and enjoying her Tuesday afternoon meal. I took a screenshot of Marin's response and added it to my growing file of evidence. My phone rang immediately. Marin's name flashed on the screen, and I could practically hear the indignation in the ringtone. "Dean, what in heaven's name is going on?" Marin's voice was sharp with confusion and rising anger. "Zoya told us she couldn't make lunch because she had to work late, and now you're sending me pictures of her at some bar with that Beck character?" "I was hoping you could tell me," I replied, keeping my voice level. "She texted me about being at Fina's funeral, but clearly that's not the case." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 10 seconds. When Marin spoke again, her voice had taken on the cold, clipped tone she usually reserved for discussing my career prospects. "Hayes and I will be right over. Don't go anywhere and don't do anything stupid." The line went quiet, and I set my phone down on the desk. Through my office window, I could see the harbor where fishing boats bobbed alongside pleasure craft, their masts creating a forest of vertical lines against the gray Maine sky. It was peaceful, orderly, everything my marriage apparently wasn't. I spent the next hour organizing my evidence. I printed out the screenshot of the live stream, Zoya's text message, and Marin's response. I created a timeline of events and double-checked every detail. By the time I was finished, I had a folder that would make any prosecutor proud. The drive home took 15 minutes through Portland's narrow streets. Our house sat on a quiet residential block just off Forest Avenue, a 1920s colonial that we'd bought 3 years ago with plans to renovate. The plans were still in a drawer somewhere, another project that Zoya had lost interest in once the initial excitement wore off. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house we'd shared for 3 years. The blue shutters needed paint, and the front steps had a loose board I'd been meaning to fix. It struck me that I'd been meaning to fix a lot of things lately, and not just around the house. Inside, I went straight to our bedroom and began the methodical process of packing Zoya's belongings. I wasn't angry. Anger was messy, unpredictable. I was something else entirely, coldly, precisely focused. I folded her clothes neatly, organized her jewelry in the small boxes she preferred, and gathered her toiletries from the bathroom. Each item went into one of 3 suitcases I pulled from the closet. As I worked, I created an inventory list, documenting everything I packed. If Zoya wanted to claim I'd stolen or damaged her belongings, she'd find that difficult to prove. The doorbell rang at 6:30 p.m., just as I was placing the last suitcase by the front door. Through the window, I could see Marin and Hayes Rellan standing on my porch, their faces grim. Hayes held his car keys in one hand and what looked like a printed email in the other. I opened the door and stepped aside to let them in. Marin brushed past me without a word, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Hayes nodded grimly and followed his wife into the living room. "Where is she?" Marin demanded, turning to face me with her arms crossed. "I assume she's still at the Pinnacle," I replied. "Or wherever she went after the live stream ended." Hayes held up the paper in his hand. "We got your message, and then we got this. An email from Zoya sent an hour ago, asking if we could loan her $5,000 for unexpected expenses. She said she'd explain later." I took the printed email and scanned it quickly. The message was brief and vague, mentioning a family emergency and promising to pay back the loan within a month. It was the kind of message someone might send if they were planning to disappear for a while. "She's been lying to all of us," Marin said, sinking into our couch. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked older than her 62 years. "The question is, for how long?" I handed them the folder I'd prepared. "Based on what I found today, probably longer than any of us want to know. Hayes opened the folder and began reading, while Marin looked over his shoulder. I watched their faces as they processed the timeline, the screenshots, the carefully documented evidence of their daughter's deception. She used her grandmother's supposed passing as cover for an affair, Hayes said finally, his voice hollow. That's a new low, even for Zoya. Marin stood up abruptly and walked to the window overlooking our front yard. We raised her better than this, Hayes. We taught her about honesty, about family loyalty. How did we go so wrong? You didn't go wrong, I said. Zoya made her choices. She chose to lie about where she was, chose to meet with Beck, chose to ask you for money while she was out with another man. Those are her decisions, not yours. The sound of a car door slamming outside interrupted our conversation. Through the window, I could see Zoya's silver Honda Civic parked behind her parents' car. She was walking up the front path, her phone pressed to her ear, apparently unaware of the reception waiting for her. She's here, I announced, and Marin and Hayes moved to flank me as I opened the front door. Zoya looked up from her phone call as she reached the porch, and her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, and finally, calculation. She ended her call and slipped the phone into her purse. Mom, Dad, what are you doing here? She looked past them to where I stood in the doorway. Dean, what's going on? Why are my bags on the porch? We need to talk, Marin said, her voice steady but cold. All of us. Zoya's eyes darted between her parents and me, and I could see her mind working, trying to figure out how much we knew and what story might still work. It was a look I'd seen before, usually right before she explained why something that was clearly her fault was actually someone else's responsibility. Can we at least go inside? She asked. The neighbors are going to think something's wrong. Something is wrong, Hayes said. The question is, are you going to tell us the truth, or do we need to show you what we already know? Zoya's composure cracked slightly. She glanced at me, and I saw a flicker of the uncertainty she usually kept hidden beneath her confident exterior. I don't know what you think you know, she said, but there's obviously been some kind of misunderstanding. I stepped forward and handed her a printed copy of the screenshot from the live stream. This was taken at 3:15 this afternoon. You texted me at 2:47 to say you were at your grandmother's funeral. Zoya stared at the image, and I watched the color drain from her face. When she looked up, her eyes had hardened into the expression I'd learned to recognize as her preparation for battle. This isn't what it looks like, she began, but Marin cut her off. Your grandmother is alive and well, Zoya. We had lunch with her today while you were apparently drinking with Beck Darren. So please explain to us what this actually looks like. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. A car passed on the street behind us, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Zoya looked at each of us in turn, and I could see her calculating whether any story might still save her. Finally, she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. Fine. Yes, I was with Beck. But it's not what you think. We were just talking about old times, catching up. There's nothing wrong with having coffee with a friend. Coffee? Hayes held up his phone, showing the same live stream I'd captured earlier. This shows you drinking alcohol at a rooftop bar, and your arm is around him, Zoya. That's not how people have coffee with old friends. And you lied about a funeral, I added. You used your grandmother's supposed passing as cover for whatever this was. That's not a misunderstanding or a mistake. That's deliberate deception. Zoya's facade finally crumbled. Her shoulders sagged, and when she spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. I knew you wouldn't understand. You've never liked Beck, never trusted me to make my own decisions about who I can be friends with. I thought if I just said I was busy, you'd make a big deal about it. So you chose to lie about your grandmother's funeral instead? Marin's voice was incredulous. Zoya, do you have any idea how hurtful that is? How disrespectful to Fina, to your family, to your marriage. It was just supposed to be one afternoon, Zoya said, and I could hear the desperation creeping into her voice. Beck's been going through a rough time with his business, and he needed someone to talk to. I was trying to help a friend. By lying to your husband and your parents, Hayes said. By asking us for money while you were out with another man. By making us think your grandmother had passed away. I watched this exchange with a strange sense of detachment. This was the woman I'd married, the woman I'd planned to spend my life with, and she was unraveling before my eyes. But instead of sadness or anger, I felt something closer to relief. The uncertainty was over. The pretending could stop. The bags stay on the porch, I said quietly. You can figure out where you're going from here, but it won't be back inside this house. Zoya turned to me with wide eyes, as if she'd forgotten I was there. Dean, please, we can work through this. It was a mistake, a moment of poor judgment. Don't throw away 6 years of marriage over one afternoon. This isn't about one afternoon, I replied. This is about who you are when you think no one is watching. This is about the choices you make when you think you won't get caught. She looked to her parents for support, but found only disappointment in their faces. Marin shook her head slowly, and Hayes folded his arms across his chest. You made your choice, Zoya, Marin said. Now you have to live with the consequences. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for the first time in months without the sound of Zoya's alarm going off at 6:15 a.m. The silence was profound, almost unsettling. I'd grown so accustomed to her morning routine, the shower running, the hairdryer humming, the constant stream of commentary about her day ahead, that the absence felt like a physical presence. I made coffee in the kitchen, noting how different the space felt without her clutter. No lipstick-stained mugs in the sink, no scattered papers from her HR job at the medical center, no half-eaten yogurt containers forgotten on the counter. It was cleaner, more organized, but somehow hollow. My phone had 17 missed calls from Zoya and 12 text messages, ranging from apologetic to angry to desperate. I deleted them without reading past the first few words. Whatever she had to say, I'd heard enough yesterday. At 7:30 a.m., I drove to the construction site, where my crew was beginning work on a new office complex. The familiar sounds of machinery and shouted instructions felt grounding after the chaos of the previous evening. This was my world. Concrete and steel. Problems that could be solved with the right tools and enough planning. Vic was waiting by the trailer that served as our on-site office, holding 2 cups of coffee from the diner down the street. He was a stocky man in his 40s, with calloused hands and a direct way of speaking that I'd always appreciated. Rough night? He asked, handing me one of the cups. You could say that. I unlocked the trailer and we went inside, away from the curious ears of the crew. Want to talk about it? I gave him the abbreviated version, the text, the live stream, the confrontation with her parents. Vic listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or shaking his head. So, what's the plan? He asked when I finished. Honestly, I'm not sure yet. I've got a meeting with a lawyer this afternoon to discuss separation procedures. Beyond that, I'm taking it one day at a time. And Zoya? Where'd she end up last night? No idea. Her problem to solve now. Vic studied my face for a moment. You're taking this pretty calmly, all things considered. I'm tired, Vic. I've been tired for a long time. Yesterday just gave me permission to stop pretending everything was fine. The rest of the morning passed in the comfortable rhythm of construction work. I reviewed blueprints, coordinated with subcontractors, and dealt with a delivery truck that had gotten lost trying to find our site. Normal problems with normal solutions. At noon, I drove to Rosie's Diner on Congress Street for lunch. Rosie's had been a Portland institution for 40 years, serving generous portions of comfort food to locals who appreciated consistency over innovation. The owner, Barbara, everyone called her Barb, had an encyclopedic knowledge of local gossip and a talent for extracting information from her customers. I'd barely settled into my usual booth when Barb appeared with a cup of coffee and a knowing look. "Heard you had some excitement at your house yesterday," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "News travels fast." "Honey, in a town this size, news travels at the speed of light, especially when it involves someone like Zoya." Barb lowered her voice conspiratorially. "That girl's been trouble since high school. Pretty as a picture, but trouble nonetheless." "What have you heard?" "Well, Marge Henley lives 2 houses down from you, and she saw the whole thing. Zoya's parents on your porch, the suitcases, the shouting. Then she saw Zoya drive off around 8 o'clock, tires squealing like she was in some kind of movie." Barb paused to refill my coffee cup, though it was still half full. "But that's not the interesting part," she continued. "The interesting part is what happened after. Around 10 o'clock, Beck Darren shows up in that fancy BMW of his, sits in your driveway for maybe 20 minutes, engine running. Then he gets out, walks up to your door, and apparently thinks better of it because he turns around and leaves without knocking." This was news to me. I'd gone to bed early, exhausted from the emotional turmoil of the day, and hadn't heard a car in the driveway. "Any idea what he wanted?" "My guess? He was trying to figure out how much trouble he was in. Word is, his business hasn't been doing so well lately. Some folks are saying he's been making promises he can't keep, if you know what I mean." I didn't know what she meant, but I filed the information away for future reference. "There's something else," Barb said, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "My niece Kendra works at the bank downtown. She says Beck's been in there 3 times in the past month, trying to get extensions on loans, and each time he's had a different woman with him, claiming to be his business partner. Different women? Different each time. Young, pretty, well-dressed. The kind who might be willing to co-sign a loan for a charming man with a sob story." The implications of this information settled over me like a cold fog. If Beck was in financial trouble, and if he was using women to help secure loans, then Zoya might be in more danger than I'd realized. "Barb, I need to ask you a favor." "Name it." "If you hear anything else about Beck or about Zoya, would you let me know? I have a feeling this situation is more complicated than it appears. Honey, I've been watching people's drama for 40 years. This has all the makings of a disaster, and I don't want to see you get caught in the wreckage." I left the diner with more questions than answers and drove to my appointment with Patricia Morse, a family law attorney who'd been recommended by a colleague. Her office was in a converted Victorian house on State Street, all polished wood and leather-bound books. Patricia was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes who got straight to the point. "Based on what you've told me, you have grounds for separation, potentially divorce, on the basis of adultery and abandonment," she said, reviewing the notes she'd taken during our conversation. "The evidence you've gathered is solid, the text messages, the live stream footage, the witness testimony from her parents." "What's the process look like?" "We file for legal separation first, which gives us time to gather additional evidence and negotiate terms. If Zoya contests the filing, we'll need to be prepared for a potentially lengthy legal battle. And if she doesn't contest it? Then we can move relatively quickly to a final divorce decree. The main issues will be property division and any outstanding debts." We spent another hour discussing the practical aspects of separation, bank accounts, insurance policies, the house. It was a sobering conversation that reduced 6 years of marriage to a series of legal and financial considerations. As I was leaving Patricia's office, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Dean, this is Fina Marin." Zoya's grandmother. Her voice was strong and clear, with just a hint of the Maine accent she'd never quite lost, despite 60 years of trying to sound more refined. "Hello, Fina. How are you feeling?" "I'm fine as frog's hair, which I suspect you already know. I'm calling because I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. The hell I don't. That granddaughter of mine used my supposed passing as cover for her shenanigans, and that reflects poorly on how I raised her mother and how her mother raised her. I could hear the anger in her voice, controlled but unmistakable. Fina, Zoya's choices are her own. You're not responsible for what she did. Maybe not, but I'm responsible for what happens next. I want you to know that Marin and Hayes have my full support in whatever they decide to do about this situation, and I want you to know that if you need anything at all, you call me. I appreciate that. There's something else. Zoya called me this morning, crying and carrying on about how everyone was being unfair to her. She wanted me to talk to you, to convince you to take her back. What did you tell her? I told her that a woman who would lie about her grandmother's funeral to cover up an affair isn't a woman worth taking back. Then I hung up on her. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. Fina Marin was 91 years old and tougher than most people half her age. She also asked me for money, Fina continued. $2,000, she said, just to get back on her feet. I told her she could get back on her feet by getting a job and living with the consequences of her actions. Good for you. Dean, I need to tell you something else, something I probably should have mentioned years ago. I waited while she gathered her thoughts. Zoya's always been a storyteller. Even as a little girl, she'd rather tell an interesting lie than a boring truth. Most of the time, it was harmless. Tales about imaginary friends or adventures that never happened. But as she got older, the lies got bigger, more elaborate. Why didn't you say something before? Because I hoped marriage would settle her down, give her a reason to be honest. And because I liked you, Dean. You seemed like a good man who genuinely cared about her. I thought maybe you'd be the one to help her grow up. I tried. I know you did. But some people don't want to be helped. Some people prefer the drama of their own creation to the peace of an honest life. We talked for a few more minutes, and I found myself genuinely touched by her support. Fina had always been kind to me, but I'd assumed it was just politeness. Now I realized she'd been watching, evaluating, forming her own opinions about her granddaughter's marriage. After we hung up, I sat in my truck outside Patricia's office and tried to process the day's revelations. Beck's financial troubles, Zoya's history of lying, the growing network of people who were willing to support me through this situation. For the first time since receiving that text message yesterday, I felt like I had some control over what happened next. My phone buzzed with another text from Zoya. Please call me. We need to talk. I'm staying at Beck's place temporarily, but I want to come home. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. She was staying at Beck's place, the same Beck who was apparently in financial trouble and had been using women to co-sign loans. I started the truck and headed home, already planning my next moves. If Zoya wanted to tie her future to Beck Darren, that was her choice. But I wasn't going to make it easy for either of them. Thursday morning brought the first real test of my resolve. I was reviewing supply orders in my office when my phone rang, displaying Zoya's work number. She was calling from the medical center where she worked as an HR manager, probably hoping I'd be more likely to answer a call during business hours. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, she called again. Then again. On the fourth call, I picked up. Dean, thank God, she said, her voice breathless with relief. I was starting to think you'd blocked my number. I'm at work, Zoya. What do you need? I need to explain what happened. Really explain, not just the abbreviated version from Tuesday night. Can we meet somewhere? Just for coffee, somewhere neutral? I don't think that's a good idea. Please. I know how this looks, but there are things you don't understand about the situation with Beck. Things that would change your perspective if you knew the whole story. I leaned back in my chair, curious despite myself. Such as? Not over the phone. Meet me at Arabica on Exchange Street at lunch. 1 hour, that's all I'm asking. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Arabica was a small coffee shop in the Old Port District, usually busy enough to provide privacy through ambient noise, but not so crowded that conversations couldn't be heard. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a table near the back, where I could see the entrance and exit. Zoya walked in precisely on time, looking more subdued than I'd seen her in months. She wore a simple black dress and minimal makeup, and her usual confident stride had been replaced by something more hesitant. She ordered a latte and sat down across from me, her hands wrapped around the cup as if she were cold. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I wasn't sure you would. You said there were things I didn't understand." "I'm listening." She took a sip of her latte, buying time to organize her thoughts. "Beck contacted me about 3 weeks ago. He said he was in trouble, that his business was failing and he needed help. Not money. He was very clear about that. He needed someone to vouch for his character, to serve as a reference for a loan restructuring. And you agreed to help your ex-boyfriend without mentioning it to your husband. I knew you wouldn't understand. You've never liked Beck, never trusted my judgment when it came to maintaining friendships with people from my past. Maybe because your past keeps interfering with our present." She flinched at that, but continued. "The meeting on Tuesday was supposed to be a quick lunch to go over the details of what I'd need to say to his loan officer. But when I got there, Beck was already drinking, and he was more upset than I'd expected. So you decided to lie about your grandmother's funeral instead of just telling me the truth. I panicked. I knew if I told you I was meeting Beck, you'd either try to talk me out of it or insist on coming with me, and he'd specifically asked to meet alone because he was embarrassed about the financial situation." "Zoya, do you hear yourself? You're describing a series of choices you made to deceive me, and you're presenting them as if they were unavoidable circumstances. I'm trying to explain my thinking at the time. Your thinking was to use your grandmother's supposed funeral as cover for meeting with another man. That's not a mistake or poor judgment. That's calculated deception." She set down her cup and looked directly at me for the first time since sitting down. "You're right. It was calculated, and it was wrong. I should have told you the truth from the beginning, should have trusted you to understand that I was trying to help a friend in trouble. What else aren't you telling me?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if you're capable of lying about something this significant, what other lies have I been living with?" "Dean, I've never cheated on you, if that's what you're asking. Tuesday was the first time I'd seen Beck in over a year, and nothing physical happened between us. But you asked your parents for money while you were out with him, $5,000 for unexpected expenses." Her face went pale. "How do you know about that?" "Your parents showed me the email. They wanted to understand why their daughter was asking for money while she was supposed to be at a funeral. The money wasn't for me. It was for Beck. His loan payment is due next week, and if he defaults, he'll lose his condo and his business. I thought maybe I could help him get through this rough patch." "So you were planning to take money from your parents and give it to your ex-boyfriend, all without telling your husband. When you put it like that, it sounds terrible." "It is terrible, Zoya. It's a betrayal of every important relationship in your life." She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her latte as if it might contain answers to questions she didn't know how to ask. "What do you want me to do?" she asked finally. "How do I fix this?" "I don't think you can." "That's it? 6 years of marriage and you're ready to throw it all away over one mistake?" "This isn't one mistake. This is a pattern of behavior that I've been ignoring for too long. The lies, the drama, the way you prioritize other people's needs over our relationship." "What pattern? Give me examples." "Last year, when you told me you were working late but you were actually at your college reunion with Beck. The year before that, when you said you needed space to think about our relationship, but you were really planning a surprise party for your ex-roommate. The constant stories about your coworkers that never quite add up when I meet them in person. Those were all innocent situations that you're choosing to interpret in the worst possible way." "Maybe. But Tuesday wasn't innocent, and it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate choice to lie to me about something important." Zoya reached across the table and touched my hand. "Dean, I love you. I know I've made mistakes. but I love you, and I want to make this work. I looked down at her hand on mine, remembering when that touch would have been enough to make me forget whatever we'd been arguing about. I believe you love me, I said, but I don't think you respect me, and without respect, love isn't enough. I pulled my hand away and stood up. I filed for legal separation. You'll be served with papers in the next few days. Dean, wait. Take care of yourself, Zoya, and be careful with Beck. I've heard some things about his financial situation that suggest he might not be the friend you think he is. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I left her sitting at the table and walked back to my truck, feeling simultaneously relieved and exhausted. The conversation had confirmed what I'd already suspected. Zoya was incapable of taking full responsibility for her actions. Every lie was justified. Every deception was presented as a reasonable response to circumstances beyond her control. My phone rang as I was driving back to the construction site. The caller ID showed Kendra Walsh, Vic's younger sister, and one of the few private investigators in Portland who specialized in domestic cases. Dean, Vic asked me to call you. He's worried about this situation with your wife and thought you might need some professional help. What kind of help? The kind that makes sure you have all the facts before you make any permanent decisions. Can we meet this afternoon? I've got some information about Beck Darren that you're going to want to hear. We arranged to meet at her office after I finished work. Kendra Walsh Investigations occupied a small suite above a bookstore on Congress Street, accessible through a narrow staircase that creaked with every step. Kendra was a compact woman in her 30s with short, dark hair and the kind of direct gaze that probably made lying to her extremely difficult. Her office was Spartan but organized, with filing cabinets along one wall and a desk that held 2 computers and several stacks of paperwork. Vic filled me in on the basic situation, she said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair across from her desk. Your wife lied about attending a funeral to cover up a meeting with her ex-boyfriend, and now you're wondering what else she might be lying about. That's a fair summary. Good. Because I spent today looking into Beck Darren's background, and what I found is going to complicate your situation considerably. She opened a file folder and spread several documents across her desk. Beck owns a small investment consulting firm called Darren Financial Services. On paper, it looks legitimate. Proper licensing, registered address, even a decent website. But when you dig deeper, things get interesting. She handed me a printout of what appeared to be a credit report. Beck's been living beyond his means for at least 2 years. Credit cards maxed out, car payments behind, rent on his office space overdue. But here's the curious part. Despite all this financial stress, he's been making regular payments on a luxury condo and driving a BMW that's worth more than most people's houses. How is that possible? Because he's been getting help. Financial help from women who think they're in relationships with him. Kendra pulled out another document, a bank statement with several names and account numbers highlighted. In the past 6 months, Beck has received deposits from 4 different women, amounts ranging from $1,500 to $5,000, all described as loans or business investments. And Zoya? No deposits from her yet, but based on the pattern, I'd say she's being set up to be number 5. The implications of this information hit me like a physical blow. Zoya wasn't just helping an old friend in trouble. She was being manipulated by someone who made a habit of exploiting women's emotions for financial gain. There's more, Kendra continued. Beck's business license is about to be revoked for failure to maintain proper insurance and bonding. His office lease expires next month, and his landlord has already filed eviction proceedings. Whatever he's told your wife about his situation, it's much worse than she knows. So, what's his endgame? My guess? He's planning to take whatever money he can get from his current targets and disappear. Start over somewhere else with a new identity and a new set of victims. I stared at the documents spread across Kendra's desk, trying to process the scope of Beck's deception. What should I do with this information? That depends on your goals. If you want to protect your wife from being scammed, you could share what I've found and hope she believes you. If you want to protect yourself from being dragged into Beck's legal troubles, you document everything and make sure you can prove you had no knowledge of his activities. And if I want to stop him from hurting other people? Then we keep investigating, gather enough evidence to interest law enforcement, and hope the authorities can act before he disappears. I thought about Zoya sitting in that coffee shop, still believing she was helping a friend in need. Despite everything she'd done, despite the lies and the betrayal, I didn't want to see her become the victim of a con artist. Keep investigating, I said, and send me copies of everything you find. I have a feeling this story is just getting started. Friday morning brought unexpected complications. I was on site early, reviewing the day's work schedule with Vic, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Patricia Morse, my attorney. "Dean, we have a problem," she said without preamble. "Zoya retained counsel yesterday, and her attorney filed a counter-petition claiming you've been financially and emotionally abusive throughout the marriage." I sat down heavily on a stack of lumber. "That's completely false." "I know that, and we'll be able to prove it, but it complicates our timeline significantly. Her attorney is also claiming that you've been having an affair and that you manufactured the evidence of her infidelity to cover up your own." "With whom am I supposedly having this affair?" "They don't specify, but they're requesting access to your phone records, email accounts, and financial statements going back 2 years. Let them look. They won't find anything because there's nothing to find. The bigger problem is that this turns what should have been a straightforward separation into a contested divorce. We're looking at months of litigation, possibly longer." After hanging up with Patricia, I filled Vic in on the latest developments. "So she's going on the offensive," he said. "Trying to make you look like the bad guy before you can expose what she's been doing." "Seems that way. What's your next move?" "I'm going to call Kendra and see what else she's found out about Beck. If he's planning to disappear with Zoya's money, maybe we can speed up that timeline." Kendra answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting for my call. "I was just about to contact you," she said. "I've got some interesting developments on the Beck-Darren front." "Good news or bad news?" "Depends on your perspective. Beck filed paperwork yesterday to dissolve Darren Financial Services. He's also put his condo on the market and canceled his office lease early." "So he's preparing to run." "It looks that way, but here's the interesting part. He's not running alone. I've been monitoring his social media accounts, and he's been posting pictures of himself with a woman who matches your wife's description. Romantic dinners, walks on the beach, the whole courtship routine. He's posting pictures of Zoya? Not tagged with her name, and her face isn't clearly visible in most of them, but the physical characteristics match. Height, hair color, general build." "When were these posted?" "The first one was Tuesday night, about 6 hours after your confrontation with her parents. The most recent one was this morning." I felt a cold anger settling in my chest. While Zoya was claiming to be the victim of an abusive marriage, she was apparently playing house with the man who'd helped destroy that marriage. "Kendra, I need you to do something for me. Can you find out where Beck is planning to go when he leaves Portland?" "I can try. Why?" "Because I think it's time to have a conversation with him. Dean, be careful. If he's running a con game, he's probably not going to react well to being confronted." "I'm not planning to confront him. I'm planning to help him along." I spent the rest of the morning developing a plan. If Beck was determined to leave Portland with whatever money he could extract from his victims, then I was going to make sure that departure happened sooner rather than later. At lunch, I drove to the Pinnacle, the rooftop bar where Zoya and Beck had been photographed on Tuesday. The lunch crowd was light, mostly business people grabbing quick meals between meetings. I ordered a sandwich and struck up a conversation with the bartender, a young man named Tyler, who looked like he might be working his way through college. I'm trying to track down a friend of mine who was here Tuesday afternoon, I said, showing him the screenshot of Beck and Zoya. Tall guy, expensive suit, driving a silver BMW. He might have left his business card or mentioned where he was staying. Tyler studied the photo for a moment. Yeah, I remember him. Good tipper, but kinda loud. He was telling everyone about some big business deal he was working on. Something about investment opportunities in Florida. Florida? Yeah. He said he was moving there next week to open a new office. Kept buying drinks for people and talking about how much money they could make if they invested with him. I thanked Tyler and left a generous tip, then called Kendra from my truck. Florida, I said when she answered. Beck's planning to move to Florida. That makes sense. Florida has more relaxed regulations for financial services, and it's easier to disappear there if things go wrong. Can you find out specifically where in Florida? Give me a few hours. My next call was to Barb at the diner. Barb, I need another favor. Can you put the word out that Beck Darren is leaving town soon, and that anyone who's loaned him money should probably try to collect it before he goes? Honey, that's not going to be a favor. That's going to be a public service. How soon are we talking? Based on what I've heard, probably within the next week. Consider it done. By tonight, every person in Portland who's had any financial dealings with that man will know he's planning to skip town. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of construction work and phone calls. Patricia called to update me on the legal proceedings. Kendra called with Beck's Florida address, a luxury apartment complex in Miami Beach that catered to short-term rentals. Vic called to tell me that word was already spreading about Beck's impending departure. At 5 o'clock, I drove home to find Zoya's car in my driveway. She was sitting on the front steps, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd seen her since we first met. When I got out of my truck, she stood up and walked toward me. We need to talk, she said. I thought we covered everything yesterday. Things have changed. Beck's leaving Portland and he wants me to go with him. Congratulations. Dean, I'm serious. He's offered me a partnership in his new business venture in Florida. A chance to start over, to build something meaningful. What kind of business venture? Investment consulting, focused on helping retirees manage their portfolios. It's a growing market, and Beck has the expertise to make it successful. I stared at her, wondering if she genuinely believed what she was saying, or if she was just repeating Beck's sales pitch. Zoya, do you know anything about Beck's current financial situation? I know he's had some setbacks recently, but that's why this Florida opportunity is so important. It's a chance for him to rebuild. Have you given him any money? I've helped him with some short-term cash flow issues, but that's what partners do. They support each other through difficult times. How much money? She hesitated, and I could see her calculating whether honesty or evasion would serve her better. $3,000. It's a loan, not a gift. He's going to pay it back with interest once the new business is established. Where did you get $3,000? I had some savings, and my parents helped with the rest. So she had convinced her parents to give her money, and she'd turned it over to Beck. The scope of her poor judgment was staggering. Zoya, I need to show you something. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots Kendra had sent me. Beck's credit report, the bank statements showing deposits from multiple women, the business license revocation. She studied the documents for several minutes, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to something approaching panic. Where did you get these? That's not important. What's important is that Beck isn't who you think he is. He's a con artist who specializes in taking money from women who think they're helping him. You hired someone to investigate him. I hired someone to investigate the man my wife was planning to run away with, yes. You had no right. I had every right to protect myself from being dragged into his legal troubles when his business collapses. She handed my phone back and wrapped her arms around herself as if she were cold. He loves me, she said quietly. He loves your money, and your parents' money, and whatever other money he can convince you to access. You're wrong. I know him, Dean. I've known him since college. He's not capable of the kind of deception you're describing. The Beck you knew in college was 20 years old and had different priorities. People change, Zoya. Sometimes they change in ways that make them dangerous. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ground between us. Even if you're right about Beck, that doesn't change what's wrong with our marriage. You're absolutely right. Our marriage has problems that have nothing to do with Beck Darren, but those problems don't justify what you've done, and they don't make Beck a viable alternative. So what are you suggesting? That I come crawling back to you, apologize for my mistakes, and pretend none of this ever happened? I'm suggesting that you take some time to figure out what you actually want, independent of what Beck wants or what you think I want. Make decisions based on what's best for your future, not what feels good in the moment. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you find somewhere safe to stay that isn't Beck's condo, and you don't give him any more money. She looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Why do you care what happens to me? I thought you were done with our marriage. I am done with our marriage. But that doesn't mean I want to see you get hurt or taken advantage of. So this is about your conscience, not about me. Maybe. Does it matter? She considered this for a moment, then shook her head. I'm going to Florida with Beck. Whatever his problems are, we'll work through them together. That's what people do when they care about each other. Then there's nothing more to discuss. I walked past her toward my front door, then stopped and turned back. Zoya, when this goes wrong, and it will go wrong, don't call me for help. I've given you all the information you need to make an informed decision. What you do with it is up to you. She was still standing in my driveway when I closed the door behind me. Saturday morning brought the phone call I'd been expecting. It was Maren, Zoya's mother, and she sounded frantic. Dean, we need your help. Zoya's missing. I set down my coffee cup and moved to the window overlooking my backyard. What do you mean, missing? She didn't come home last night, and she's not answering her phone. Hayes called her work, but they said she called in sick yesterday and today. We're worried something's happened to her. When did you last hear from her? Thursday evening. She called asking for more money, said she needed another $2,000 for some kind of business opportunity. When we said no, she got angry and hung up on us. Have you tried calling Beck? There was a pause on the other end of the line. We don't have his number. We were hoping you might. I could have told Maren that I'd seen Zoya yesterday evening, that she'd announced her intention to go to Florida with Beck. But something about the timing bothered me. If Zoya had been planning to leave with Beck, why would she disappear without telling her parents? Let me make some calls, I said. I'll get back to you within an hour. My first call was to Kendra. I need you to check on Beck Darren's current status. Zoya's missing, and I'm wondering if their travel plans got moved up. Give me 20 minutes. While I waited for Kendra to call back, I drove to Beck's condo complex. The parking garage was mostly empty, and Beck's silver BMW was nowhere to be seen. I took the elevator to his floor and knocked on his door, but there was no answer. The building's concierge, a middle-aged woman with a professional demeanor, was willing to share limited information. Mr. Darren checked out yesterday afternoon, she said. He'd been renting month to month and he gave proper notice. Was he alone? I'm sorry, but I can't share information about our residence guests. This is a potential missing person situation. A woman named Zoya Callix was supposed to meet him yesterday, and her family is concerned about her safety. The concierge's expression softened slightly. I can tell you that Mr. Darren left alone. He had several suitcases and mentioned he was driving to Florida. Did he say anything about expecting to meet someone or about anyone joining him later? No, nothing like that. He seemed to be in a hurry to leave. I thanked the concierge and returned to my truck, more confused than before. If Beck had left without Zoya, where was she? My phone rang as I was driving home. Kendra's name appeared on the caller ID. Beck's gone, she said without preamble. Checked out of his condo yesterday, closed his remaining bank accounts, and his phone's been disconnected. Any sign of Zoya? That's the interesting part. I've been monitoring her social media accounts, and she posted something at 2 o'clock this morning from a location downtown. What kind of post? A photo of herself at what looks like a hotel bar, with the caption, "Sometimes you have to save yourself." She looks upset, Dean, and she's alone in the photo. Which hotel? Based on the background, I'd guess the Eastland Park. It's the only downtown hotel with that particular bar setup. I drove straight to the Eastland Park Hotel, a historic building in the heart of Portland's Arts District. The lobby was busy with weekend guests checking in and out, and the bar was already serving lunch to a mix of tourists and locals. I found Zoya in a corner booth, nursing what appeared to be her first drink of the day. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. When she saw me approaching, her expression shifted from surprise to resignation. "Let me guess," she said, as I sat down across from her. "My parents called you. They're worried about you. They should be worried about their money. Beck took the $3,000 I gave him and disappeared sometime yesterday afternoon." "I'm sorry. Are you? Because you seem like the kind of person who'd be happy to be proven right." "I'm not happy about any of this, Zoya. I'm sorry you got taken advantage of, and I'm sorry you're hurting." She took a sip of her drink and stared out the window at the street below. "You want to know the worst part? It wasn't even about the money. I could have lived with losing the money if he'd been honest about his situation. But he lied about everything. His feelings for me, his business prospects, even his reasons for leaving Portland." "What do you mean?" "I went to his condo yesterday afternoon to surprise him, maybe help him pack for our big move to Florida. The concierge told me he'd already checked out. No note, no explanation, no goodbye. So you've been here since yesterday?" "I didn't know where else to go. I couldn't face my parents, couldn't go back to our house, couldn't even go to work because I'd already called in sick to spend time with Beck." She laughed bitterly. "I destroyed my marriage, alienated my family, and compromised my job for a man who disappeared without even having the courtesy to break up with me first. What are you going to do now?" "I honestly don't know. I can't afford this hotel much longer, and I'm not sure I have anywhere else to go." Despite everything that had happened between us, I felt a stab of sympathy for her. She looked genuinely lost, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. "You could go stay with your parents while you figure things out. After what I put them through, after taking their money and giving it to a con artist, I don't think they want to see me right now. They're worried about you, Zoya. Whatever anger they're feeling, they still love you." "Do they? Because I'm not sure I'd love me if I were in their position." We sat in silence for several minutes, watching the lunch crowd come and go. Finally, Zoya spoke again. "Dean, I owe you an apology. A real one, not the self-serving explanations I've been giving you." "Okay. I lied to you about the funeral because I was ashamed of wanting to see Beck again. Not because I was planning to have an affair, but because I missed feeling important to someone. In our marriage, I felt like I was just another item on your to-do list, something to be managed rather than cherished. That's not how I saw our relationship." "I know, and that's part of the problem. We were seeing completely different marriages, living in the same house, but experiencing different realities." She finished her drink and signaled the waitress for another. "Beck made me feel special, at least at first. He remembered things about our college years that I'd forgotten, made me laugh in ways I hadn't in months. When he asked for help with his business problems, it felt good to be needed for something more than keeping the household running smoothly." "So you chose to lie instead of talking to me about what you were feeling?" "Yes. And that was wrong, regardless of what problems existed in our marriage. I should have been honest with you about wanting to see Beck. Should have been honest about feeling disconnected from our relationship. Why are you telling me this now? Because sitting in this hotel room for the past 18 hours has given me a lot of time to think about the choices I've made, and because you deserved better than what I gave you, even if our marriage wasn't perfect." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-serving calculation, but found only exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine regret. "What do you want from me, Zoya?" "Nothing. I'm not asking you to take me back, not asking you to forgive me, not even asking you to be my friend. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did wrong, and I'm sorry for the pain I caused. I appreciate that. There's something else. I know you hired someone to investigate Beck, and I know you tried to warn me about what he was really like. I should have listened to you instead of assuming you were just trying to control me. I wasn't trying to control you. I was trying to protect you. I know that now, but at the time, it felt like another example of you not trusting my judgment. Maybe I should have trusted your judgment more, but maybe you should have given me reasons to trust it." She nodded slowly. "Fair enough." I looked at this woman I'd been married to for 6 years, sitting across from me in a hotel bar, admitting to mistakes she'd never acknowledged before. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in months, maybe years. "Zoya, what you did was wrong. The lying, the deception, the way you prioritized Beck's needs over our marriage, all of that was wrong. But you're not a terrible person. You're someone who made bad choices for understandable reasons. That's more generous than I deserve. Maybe, but it's also true." I stood up and pulled out my wallet to pay for her drinks. "Call your parents. They love you, and they'll help you figure out what comes next. But don't take any more of their money, and don't make any major decisions until you've had some time to process what's happened. What about us? What happens to our marriage? Our marriage is over, Zoya, but that doesn't mean we have to be enemies. We can be two people who tried to build something together and failed, but who learned something valuable in the process. What did you learn? That love isn't enough if it's not built on honesty and respect, and that I'd rather be alone than be with someone who sees me as an obstacle to their happiness. And what did I learn? You'll have to figure that out for yourself." I left her sitting in the hotel bar and walked out into the bright Saturday afternoon. My phone was buzzing with missed calls from her parents, but I decided to let Zoya handle that conversation herself. For the first time in weeks, I felt like the worst of the crisis was over. The lies had been exposed, the marriage was officially ended, and Beck was out of the picture. What remained was the long, slow process of rebuilding separate lives from the wreckage of our shared one. But that was a problem for Monday. For now, I was going to drive home, order pizza, and watch baseball on television like a man who had nowhere else to be and nothing else to prove. Monday morning brought an unexpected call from Kendra that changed everything. "Dean, we have a problem. Beck didn't go to Florida." I was reviewing project schedules in my office, trying to focus on normal work after the weekend's emotional upheaval. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he never made it to Miami. I've been tracking his credit card activity, and the last charge was at a gas station in New Hampshire on Friday night. Since then, nothing. Maybe he's paying cash. Maybe. But I also got a call this morning from one of his other victims, a woman named Sandra Pierce who loaned him $4,000 last month. She says Beck contacted her yesterday claiming he was stranded in New Hampshire with car trouble and needed money for repairs. I set down my pencil and gave Kendra my full attention. He's still running the same con. It gets worse. Sandra says Beck told her he had a business partner who'd stolen money from their company and disappeared. He described this partner as a vindictive ex-wife who was trying to destroy his reputation out of spite. He's talking about Zoya. That's my assumption. And if he's desperate enough to keep running cons instead of disappearing like he planned, that suggests he's in more trouble than we realized. What kind of trouble? The kind that makes people dangerous. I think you should be careful, Dean. If Beck blames you for ruining his Portland operation, he might decide to do something about it. I spent the rest of the morning thinking about Kendra's warning. Beck had lost his business, his condo, and his planned escape to Florida. He'd also lost access to Zoya's money and her parents' resources. If he was still in New Hampshire running desperate cons on his previous victims, it meant he was cornered. cornered people did unpredictable things. At lunch, I drove to the Eastland Park Hotel to check on Zoya. The concierge told me she'd checked out Sunday morning, and a quick call to Maren confirmed that she'd gone to stay with her parents. "She's in rough shape," Maren said. "Barely eating, not sleeping well, jumping every time the phone rings. I think she's scared that Beck might try to contact her." "Has he?" "Not directly. But she got a strange call yesterday from someone claiming to be a police officer in New Hampshire. They asked questions about her relationship with Beck, wanted to know if she'd given him money recently." "Did she call back to verify it was really the police?" "That's the thing. When she tried to call the number back, it was disconnected. We think it might have been Beck trying to find out what she'd told people about their relationship." This was escalating beyond what I'd expected. If Beck was impersonating police officers to gather information about his victims, he was moving into territory that would attract serious law enforcement attention. "Maren, I think you should consider filing a police report about the harassment." Hayes suggested the same thing, but Zoya's reluctant. She's embarrassed about the whole situation and doesn't want it to become public. Her embarrassment is less important than her safety. I agree. Let me talk to her again. After hanging up with Maren, I called Kendra to update her on Beck's apparent escalation. "Impersonating a police officer is a federal crime," she said. "If we can prove he did that, it changes the whole scope of the investigation." "How do we prove it?" "We set a trap. If Beck is monitoring his victims' communications, we can feed him information that will force him to make contact. And when he does, we'll be ready to record it." "What kind of trap?" "We let it be known that Zoya has access to a large sum of money, maybe an inheritance or an insurance settlement, something big enough to make Beck risk coming back to Portland. That puts Zoya in danger. Not if we control the situation. We choose the time and place, we have backup ready, and we make sure law enforcement is involved from the beginning." I wasn't comfortable with using Zoya as bait, but I also recognized that Beck wasn't going to stop his predatory behavior until he was caught. If we could end his ability to victimize other women, it might be worth the risk. "Let me talk to Zoya first. If she's not willing to participate, we'll find another way." "Fair enough. But Dean, if we're going to do this, we need to move fast. The longer Beck stays desperate, the more dangerous he becomes." That afternoon, I drove to Maren and Hayes' house in Cape Elizabeth. It was a substantial colonial on a tree-lined street, the kind of neighborhood where successful professionals raised their families and worried about property values. Zoya answered the door, looking better than she had at the hotel, but still fragile. She wore jeans and a sweater that looked borrowed from her mother, and her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. "Dean, I wasn't expecting to see you. We need to talk about Beck. Can we sit somewhere private?" She led me to the sunroom at the back of the house, a bright space filled with plants and comfortable furniture. Through the windows, I could see the harbor in the distance, dotted with sailboats enjoying the late afternoon breeze. "How are you doing?" I asked. "Better than I was on Saturday. My parents have been incredibly patient, considering everything I put them through." Maren told me about the phone call from the fake police officer. Zoya's face darkened. That was definitely Beck. He used the same tone of voice he always used when he was trying to get information without seeming like he was prying. "Zoya, I think Beck is planning to come back to Portland." "Why would he do that?" "He got what he wanted from me and disappeared." I explained what Kendra had discovered about Beck's failed escape to Florida, his continued con games in New Hampshire, and the escalating desperation that suggested he was running out of options. If he's still targeting his previous victims, it means he needs more money than he was able to steal the first time around, and you're the victim with the most potential access to funds. "What do you mean?" "Your parents have money. You have a job, a family, connections in the community. From Beck's perspective, you're a resource he hasn't fully exploited yet." Zoya was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the harbor. "So what are you suggesting?" "Kendra thinks we can set a trap. Make Beck believe you've come into a large sum of money, Something big enough to make him risk coming back to Portland. When he makes contact, we'll be ready with law enforcement backup. You want to use me as bait. I want to stop him from hurting other people, but only if you're comfortable with the risk. What kind of risk are we talking about? Minimal if we do it right. We control the meeting location, we have backup in place, and we make sure the police are involved from the beginning. Beck's a con artist, not a violent criminal. His weapon is manipulation, not physical force. But if he's desperate enough, that could change. Yes, that's why we need to be careful. Zoya stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the water. Dean, why are you doing this? You could just let Beck disappear and hope he becomes someone else's problem. Because he won't disappear. He'll keep finding women to victimize until someone stops him. And because you deserve to have some control over how this ends. What do you mean? You've been a victim in this situation, of Beck's manipulation, of your own poor judgment, of circumstances beyond your control. This gives you a chance to be something other than a victim. She turned back to face me. What exactly would I have to do? Post something on social media about coming into unexpected money, maybe a fake inheritance from a distant relative, or an insurance settlement from an old accident. Something that would explain why you suddenly have access to $50,000 or $60,000. And then? Then we wait for Beck to make contact. When he does, you arrange to meet him somewhere public, somewhere we can control the situation. Where? Kendra suggested the marina downtown, lots of open space, multiple exit routes, easy for law enforcement to monitor. Zoya was quiet for several minutes, considering the proposal. If I do this, what happens to Beck when he's caught? He'll be arrested for fraud, probably extortion, possibly impersonating a police officer. With multiple victims across state lines, he's looking at federal charges and significant prison time. Good. The vehemence in her voice surprised me. He destroyed my marriage, took my money, and made me feel like an idiot for believing in him. But worse than that, he's probably doing the same thing to other women right now. If I can help stop that, then maybe something good can come out of this disaster. So, you'll do it? Yes, but I have one condition. What's that? I want to be the one who confronts him. When he shows up expecting to manipulate me again, I want to be the one who tells him it's over. Zoya, that might not be safe. Dean, I need this. I need to look him in the eye and tell him that I'm not the naive woman he thinks I am. I need to take back some of the power he stole from me. I studied her face, seeing a determination I hadn't witnessed in years. Okay, but we do this by the book, with full law enforcement coordination, and you follow Kendra's instructions exactly. Agreed. We spent the next hour planning the details. Zoya would post about her fictional inheritance on social media that evening, making sure the post was visible to Beck's known associates who might pass the information along. We'd give him a few days to make contact, then arrange a meeting at the marina for the following weekend. As I was leaving, Zoya walked me to the door. Dean, thank you for this, for giving me a chance to end this on my terms. Just be careful. Beck's already proven he's not the person you thought he was. Neither am I. That evening I watched from my living room as Zoya's social media post went live. It was perfectly crafted, excited but not boastful, specific enough to be believable but vague enough to invite questions. Still can't believe Aunt Margaret left me her house in Bar Harbor. The insurance settlement from the fire is way more than I expected. Time to make some big changes in my life. Blessed. New beginnings, fresh start. Within an hour, the post had dozens of likes and comments from friends and family members congratulating her on her good fortune. If Beck was monitoring her social media, he'd definitely seen it. Now we just had to wait for him to take the bait. The call came Wednesday afternoon. I was on site reviewing foundation work when my phone rang with Zoya's number. He contacted me, she said, her voice tight with nervous energy. How? Text message from a number I don't recognize. He says he heard about my inheritance and wants to congratulate me in person. He's asking to meet for coffee tomorrow afternoon. What did you tell him? Nothing yet. I wanted to check with you and Kendra first. Good. Don't respond until we have everything set up. I called Kendra immediately. He took the bait faster than I expected, she said. That suggests he's more desperate than we thought. Is that good or bad? Both. Good because it means he's not thinking clearly, which makes him easier to catch. Bad because desperate people make unpredictable choices. What's our next move? I contact the Portland Police Department and the FBI field office. With evidence of interstate fraud and impersonation of a federal officer, they'll want to coordinate the operation. How long will that take? If we're lucky, we can have everything in place by Friday afternoon. That gives us time to brief everyone involved and make sure we're prepared for multiple scenarios. And Zoya? She needs to respond to Beck's text, but not too eagerly. Suggest meeting Saturday afternoon at the marina, somewhere public where she'll feel safe. I called Zoya back and walked her through Kendra's instructions. Tell him you're free Saturday afternoon, but you want to meet somewhere public because you're still hurt by the way he left. Suggest the marina, maybe the restaurant overlooking the harbor. What if he suggests somewhere else? Then you insist on the marina. Tell him it's the only place you feel comfortable meeting, given everything that's happened. Okay? Dean? Yeah? What if this goes wrong? What if he figures out it's a trap? Then you walk away. Your safety is more important than catching Beck. But if he gets away, then he gets away, and we try something else. Zoya, promise me you won't take any unnecessary risks. I promise. Saturday afternoon arrived gray and windy, with the kind of October weather that reminded everyone winter was coming. I arrived at the marina early, finding a parking spot with a clear view of the restaurant where Zoya had arranged to meet Beck. Kendra was already there, sitting in an unmarked van with 2 FBI agents and a Portland police detective. Through my earpiece, I could hear the final preparations being made. Subject's vehicle just turned into the marina parking lot, one of the agents reported. Silver BMW, license plate matches our information. Zoya, are you ready? Kendra's voice came through clearly. As ready as I'll ever be, Zoya replied from her position inside the restaurant. Through my binoculars, I watched Beck get out of his car and walk toward the restaurant. He looked the same as always, expensive suit, confident stride, the kind of smile that had probably charmed dozens of women out of their money. But there was something different about his posture, a tension that suggested he was more on edge than he wanted to appear. He's entering the restaurant now, I reported. Copy that. Zoya, remember, let him do most of the talking. We need him to make specific statements about his intentions. I couldn't see inside the restaurant from my position, but I could hear Zoya's conversation through her wire. Beck, you look good. So do you. I'm sorry about the way I left, Zoya. Things got complicated and I didn't handle it well. Complicated how? Business problems, legal issues that I couldn't drag you into. I thought it was better to make a clean break. Without even saying goodbye? I was protecting you. If you'd been associated with my business when it collapsed, it could have hurt your reputation, your job, your family. I had to admire his skill. Even now, caught in a web of his own making, Beck was spinning his abandonment as an act of selfless protection. Well, things have changed, Zoya said. I came into some money recently. Enough to start over, maybe even help you get back on your feet. I heard about your inheritance. That's wonderful news. It's more than wonderful. It's life-changing. $60,000, free and clear. There was a pause in the conversation, and I could imagine Beck calculating how much of that money he could extract. Zoya, I need to be honest with you about something. What's that? I never stopped caring about you. When I left Portland, I thought I was doing the right thing, but I've regretted it every day since. Really? Really? And now, with your inheritance, maybe we have a chance to build something together. Something real this time. What did you have in mind? I've been looking at investment opportunities in the Caribbean. places where your money could grow quickly, where we could start fresh without the baggage of our past mistakes. That sounds risky. All good investments involve some risk, but I have experience in these markets, and I know how to minimize the downside while maximizing the returns. How much money would we be talking about? Well, to really make it worthwhile, we'd want to invest the full $60,000, maybe even leverage it to access additional funds. And there it was, Beck's true intention, recorded for law enforcement and admissible in court. "Beck, I need to tell you something," Zoya said, her voice taking on a different tone. "What's that?" "There is no inheritance. There's no $60,000, and there's no future for us." The silence stretched for several seconds. "I don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You're a con artist who preys on women's emotions to steal their money. You did it to me, you've done it to other women, and you were planning to do it again today." "Zoya, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding was mine, thinking you actually cared about me, but I know better now. Look, if this is about the money I borrowed, stole. The word you're looking for is stole." Through my earpiece, I heard the sound of chairs scraping against the floor, suggesting someone was standing up quickly. "Beck Darren, you're under arrest for interstate fraud and conspiracy to commit extortion." The FBI agents had moved in, and Beck's voice turned desperate. "This is a setup! Zoya, what have you done? I've stopped you from hurting anyone else. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." I watched through my binoculars as Beck was led out of the restaurant in handcuffs, flanked by federal agents. His confident demeanor had completely evaporated, replaced by the defeated posture of a man whose carefully constructed world had just collapsed. Zoya emerged from the restaurant a few minutes later, looking shaken but resolute. She walked to where I was parked and got into my passenger seat. "How do you feel?" I asked. Scared, relieved, angry, proud, all at the same time. "You did good in there." I can't believe I ever fell for his act. Listening to him try to manipulate me again, knowing what I know now. It was like watching someone perform a magic trick after you've learned how it works. The important thing is that you saw through it this time, and that he'll never be able to do this to anyone else. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the FBI van drive away with Beck in the back seat. "So what happens now?" Zoya asked. "Now you go home, get back to your normal life, and try to move forward from all this." "And us?" "There is no us, Zoya, but there's also no animosity. We're two people who tried to build something together and learned that we weren't compatible. That's not a tragedy, it's just life. I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss parts of our relationship too. But missing something doesn't mean it was right for us." She nodded and opened the car door. "Dean, thank you for everything, for protecting me from Beck, for helping me see the truth, for giving me a chance to end this with some dignity." "Take care of yourself, Zoya." "You too." I watched her walk to her parents' car, where Marin and Hayes were waiting to drive her home. She looked back once and waved, and then they were gone. I sat in my truck for a few more minutes, looking out at the harbor where boats bobbed peacefully in their slips. The wind had died down, and the late afternoon sun was breaking through the clouds, casting everything in golden light. My phone buzzed with a text from Vic. "How did it go?" I typed back, "It's over." And for the first time in weeks, that felt like the complete truth. The marriage was over. The lies were exposed. Beck was in custody. Zoya was safe and hopefully wiser for the experience. I started the truck and drove home, ready to begin the next chapter of my life, whatever that might look like.